Hey there. So, whether it's personal challenges, global stress, or just one of those days, we've all been there, those moments when life feels really heavy. But what if we told you there's a way to navigate through it without losing yourself completely? In today's episode, we're talking about how to overcome emotional overwhelm, build on resilience, even if you don't love that word, and find your center when everything around you feels chaotic. So cozy up in your most favorite blankie, settle in, and let's explore some tools that can help you not just move through, but thrive in the most difficult of times. Let's get into it. Hi there. Welcome to the Empowered and Embodied Show. I'm Kim Romain.
And I'm Louise Neil. We're two transformational coaches who are also fellow travelers on the path of growth and self-discovery. And we're inviting you along for the ride.
That's right. We're right here in the trenches with you, navigating the ups and downs of life. And each week we'll be sharing our own experiences, bringing you conversations with amazing guests, and exploring insights and strategies that have helped us find more clarity, confidence, and ease in our lives.
And trust us, we do not have it all figured out. We're learning and growing right alongside you.
So if you're ready to rise above the chaos, doubt, and confusion that sometimes life throws our way
and step into a more empowered and embodied version of yourself,
then you're in the right place. Let's get started. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Empowered and Embodied Show. I am Kim, one of your co-hosts, joined by my other lovely co-host.
That's me. I'm Louise.
You are Louise. I love our time together. We don't have a guest this week.
No, it's just you and I sitting down at the table today. And our listener, of course.
Of course. I love having guests here. And I also really love when we have this time to just be together and have a conversation. And today's conversation is, it's a special conversation. And we've carved out some time to talk about, to talk about how we cannot feel like shit. Like, I'm just going to say it up front. So, we are recording this in October, so not that distant in the past. But this episode is dropping the day of the U.S. elections. And while I am living on the northern side of the border in Canada, I am a U.S. citizen, and many of my clients are U.S. citizens, and the entire country of Canada is closely linked, although a very separate country is closely linked to what happens in the States. And so it may be a stressful time for a person or two.
Maybe. A little.
Just a touch. Just a little touch. So we wanted to bring this episode out today, or whenever you're listening to it, to give you an opportunity to really lean into really crunchy times. And we're going to share some ideas and some thoughts on resourcing and re-regulating and overall just helping you not feel so crunchy.
Yes.
That's kind of the goal for today.
Yeah. And yes, it is a crunchy time, but there's all kinds of crunchy times. And so the things that we're going to be sharing today you'll be able to pick them up and put them in your pocket for whenever you need.
Right. Whether it's personal, global, or, whatever, anything in between. Yeah,
absolutely.
So let's actually start on our conversation by leaning into what we're celebrating.
Yes, because celebration is a big part of building resilience. I just did a workshop just a little bit ago around resilience and what that means and what that looks like, and how do we build and strengthen that muscle. And so I'm gonna lean in and celebrate. I was gonna say I'm gonna celebrate resilience, but I'm gonna celebrate my awareness of resilience, because since I did that talk and had that conversation, it's been top of mind for me to try to understand what resilience means to me when I don't need it or when I feel like I don't need it.
Oh.
And so I'm celebrating that I'm not just leaning in to strategies. I'm creating routine and ritual that helps me build that muscle in the good times. It's been really interesting to be able to explore that and not just kind of like sit back and wait to right when the times are crunchy to be able to practice some of those strategies. So that's what's been going on for me. Um, and I'm leaning into that.
Love that. It's so interesting because, as I was talking about, right, regulating and resourcing and all this stuff, I didn't say the word resilience.
Mm-hmm.
I don't tend to use the word resilience. And some of it is because of my own challenges with the word over the years, although I've moved through a lot of that. I do know there's a lot of people, particularly those that I work with that are in social justice spaces. Resilience doesn't feel real good. Like when we're told to be resilient, it doesn't feel real good because we're basically what we're being told is to push through, which is not the actual definition of resilience. Um,
Right.
right? So I love that you're leaning into it because for me that's an opportunity to again look at that word and to say that's right. We think about it in certain terms, but we don't actually use it in a way that makes sense for the majority. And nor in the way that I believe the word is actually defined. We've like created this other alternate definition that just means to, suck it up and push through. And I'm not okay with that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
so thanks for sharing that. I appreciate that. My celebration this week is about um, hidden opportunities. So very often, I am Louise. Obviously, and if anybody's been listening for a hot minute, they know that I do a lot with human design. And in human design, we're all here in some way to respond to or to listen to for invitations. So in some way, we're in response to the world around us. Um, and opportunities are always coming into our field, and they're always coming to us in different ways, and very often we don't notice them. um, I'm starting to notice them in a different way, and I realized it was because I must have up leveled recently. I guess I don't know. I don't feel like I did, but the conversations I've been having recently make me realize that I guess I have. That I went through a growth edge that I wasn't even aware of, because some of the opportunities some of the doors that are being opened and the conversations that are being had with me, like not near me, but with me, are creating opportunities that I thought were like way down the line, and they're right here, and it's really cool to be like, okay. Sure, I can be ready. Okay. So I'm celebrating the fact that part of it, I guess, is I'm celebrating the growth edge that I didn't know that I went through, that up level that wasn't even aware that I actually went through. Um, and it's showing itself in the opportunities that are now coming to me because they seemed like they were going to be not opportunities that would be available yet,
Mm.
if that makes sense.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Uh, it's fascinating that we often get hooked on like what that outcome is or like what
Hmm.
that thing looks like.
Yep.
And when we can let go of that, um, it's sometimes it's just right there. Whatever it is that we're looking for, like the offer is right there, but we're hooked and we have these blinders on and then we kind of miss those opportunities. So I love that you're in a space where you have been able to kind of step back and see the offer for what it is, although it might not have looked exactly how you imagined.
No, and the timing, right? Also that
Mm-hmm.
timing thing is things will happen in its own time.
Mm-hmm.
And And we don't have control over that. And I think that does lean into this, or open the door for this conversation we wanted to have today, because whether it's the crunchiness of what is happening real time around us, or if it is the crunchiness of something that's very personal that's happening to you, or something that's happening in the future or in the past, it doesn't really matter. The reality is the timing of that crunchiness for us, how we're experiencing it, can happen at any time.
Mm.
Just as those opportunities can come at any time and the doors can be opened at any time. It's we've talked several times over the last several weeks, in particular, about wearing different glasses and noticing um, life through a different set of lenses.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that is an interesting place where we could start this conversation on how do we resource ourselves? How do we lean into resilience? How do we find ways to regulate our emotional and nervous system, right? Our emotional body and our nervous system. How can we use that place of perspective? Because I think it shows up in how, like, my perspective on the opportunities and the perspective of how shitty the world feels right now.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay. So I'm getting real curious.
Yeah.
Like, before we talk about that, like, how do you even know that you're in a crunchy place? Like, how do you
Ooh.
even know that you need to have a different perspective or put on a different set of glasses?
So I I have two answers, because,
Okay.
as true Pisces, so we're both Pisces. As true Pisces, we tend to have both sides, and so I have two answers.
Yep.
So the first answer is when we know ourselves really, really well. So if we've spent time knowing ourselves on different and multiple levels, and when
Mm-hmm.
I say that, I mean, do we know ourselves spiritually, emotionally, physically? Like, we're aware when there's a shift.
Mm-hmm.
We may not understand the shift. We may not know what it's about. We may not, have the details, but we recognize something shifted. Just like I recognized, this is an opportunity I
Mm.
didn't think I was ready to even have a conversation about.
Right.
Here I am.
Right.
Like, it's a recognition. And so if you've done the work, if you're doing the work, because it's not like done, check, I'm done for the rest of my life. If you're doing the work, if you're in the work, you're help me out here. You're going to sense it more easily. You're going to recognize it more easily. Your spidey sense will go off, whatever it's going to be, but you're
Oh,
going to notice it,
yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
you have to be in the work.
Right. You have to know, first of all, you have a spidey sense, and
Yes.
you have to trust it. Trust that it knows something that you don't,
Right.
which I think can be really hard.
100%. And so that is like, that's the advanced, that's the
Right.
advanced degree here.
Yeah.
Most people walking around are unaware, right? And they're unaware until something potentially catastrophic happens to them. Very often it will be, right, we can have medical issues, we can have significant emotional issues that lead to clinical depression and anxiety and burnout, and right, all of those things where we need clinicians to support us. But we get to that catastrophic level and then we're like, oh, is something wrong? Is there something like, I don't, okay.
Right.
But that's kind of what that, how do you know? I think you either know, right? Because you know that there's something off because you've done the work, you're in the work, or you haven't done the work, or not, you're just starting the work and you just don't know because you're not connected in enough. And so it has to be really loud and really in your face. Like, right? Like my husband, I don't know, 10 years ago, when he's like, honey, I'm in the emergency room. No, nothing to worry about. It just might be my heart. It's like, whoa. And it was anxiety,
Mm.
right? But that was a wake up call for him to say, oh, there's something. I don't, what else comes up for you when we talk about, like, how do you know? How do you know you're in a crunchy zone?
Well, and that's why I asked the question, because I feel like I'm on kind of, I still feel like I'm an infant in this whole like self development, self awareness, like space that we find ourselves in. And I mean, I'm a professional self development, right? As a transformational coach, absolutely, that's what I do all the time. And yet, I do still feel like don't Hmm. I don't know myself as well as I would like to, because I do
Mm,
find myself sometimes deep in the crunch before I go, what the hell am I doing here? Like, how did I get here? Like, why am I letting all of this shit pile on top of me when I actually control the narrative? I control like a lot of things. And then I'm like, "Oh," and I pick myself up, I dust myself off a little bit, and then I grab my tools and I grab my resources, right? And so that's what kind of spurred me to ask that question, is because like, like you said, if you're in the work and you know yourself, you know what that feels like. But I think until we actually start like going through some of those crunchy things and being aware of what the crunch actually is, we we don't we don't know
mhm.
until it gets really, I don't know, heavy or deep, or we feel like we're drowning or whatever that is.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of like links into my celebration that I said earlier, because like this is a whole new thing for me to really think about working on knowing myself. Like, I don't know, I want to say emotionally, but I want, really what it
Mhm.
is knowing myself below the neck, right?
Right,
Knowing
because you've spent
that.
a lot of time, right, cognitively understanding yourself, right? And
Absolutely.
there is also, you have done probably more than the average bear. You have done a lot of work on your emotions. Probably not as much as me, because this has like been secondhand to me since I was 13 at least. But I'm also, that's who I am. That's my makeup. That's what
Hmm.
drives me, is that. And it was from understanding my emotions and being really curious and uh, connected to what was happening emotionally, that allowed me to understand that physically and spiritually and cognitive, like all of that kind of, to me, for me, came from that emotional space. But we're made up differently.
Hmm.
If we look at human design, we're designed differently.
Right.
um and we're also curious about different things, right?
Hmm.
We're driven to look at different things. And so I think that's also a really good point of, how do I know if I'm there? um because we do focus up in our heads, right? Even me, I focus in my head to make answers of things, to make things make sense. And I think a really key indicator that you're in the muck, that you're in the crunch, is when you can't break free from what's going on cognitively for you,
Hmm.
right? That means, like, I have a hard time even recognizing I have a body. I have a hard time
Mm.
bringing breath down below my, upper chest. I have a hard time meditating. I can't stop the squirrels from running around my brain. It's true. And, you may never be a seasoned meditator. I have squirrels in my brain and I meditate all the time. It's what you do with the squirrels. Right? It's
Right.
not that you're not going to have the squirrels. It's, what do you do
Right.
with the squirrels?
Right.
If you can't disconnect from the squirrels a little bit, you could be in the middle of the crunch.
Yeah. Yeah. And for me too, it's this recognition that I am showing up in a way, in a space that I am not, that I don't want to show up that way. Right?
Mm,
So like lots of times like there's this like big thing going on, right? Globally, in your country,
yeah.
whatever, like whatever. Let's just pretend something like that's happening. Um
Just if.
just if, then I I might be really like frustrated that the dog can't sit still, or that my kid chews with his mouth open, or that the things aren't working properly in my business, and the software is not working, like all of these things, right? And it's that recognition of like, okay, wait a minute, I'm not in alignment with who I want to be in this moment.
Mhm.
So let's figure that piece out before I can figure out like what's really going on or what that real problem is. It's that, we're here today to kind of talk about that emotional regulation piece, and like how to actually come back to yourself so that you are empowered through your body to actually start showing up in a way that is in alignment with who you are. And so that, to me, like, I really noticed that profoundly, like, not that long ago when I failed my coaching level exam.
Mhm.
Um, right? Like, I was like pissed off and angry, and the dog was irritating, and like I couldn't really understand. I was trying to process through all of these emotions, and my head told me, don't worry, right? It's practice or pass, right? This is a beast of an exam. I know more now than I did before. I get to rewrite it. It has nothing to do with who I am as a coach. It is something else that I don't know how to write that kind of exam in that kind of environment. That's okay. I'll learn it. And logically, I could go through that and process that information. But emotionally, I was spinning, and I didn't even know I was spinning because I was angry and it was crunchy, and I didn't really see that. I saw that the dog wanted something.
Wanted
So
more than you could give.
right? And so it was that whole recognition of like, hey, wait a minute, I am really not showing up in a way that feels at all in alignment with who I am and what I want to put into this moment, right? And that's just an interaction with my puppers, not another human, right? And so I
Mm.
right, that could have been a whole other crunchy moment, right? And so I think that's really important to, I think, a pin to put here is that like there's the work that we can do to emotionally regulate ourselves in the moment, and then there's the work that we do to understand when we're not in alignment, right? It's almost like the pre-work that we need to do in ourselves. We need to know who we want to be in those moments before we can even start to change who we are when we're crunchy.
Yeah. So, I have a friend or two in the US still, right? Like I said, lots of clients in the US.
Mm-hmm.
And this is not US centric, but this is something that's very real that's happening. And no matter when you listen to this, you'll know what this, and no matter what country you're from, you'll understand the tenor of which we are talking about.
Mm-hmm.
My people are showing up flooded. That is the best way that I can say it. Anxious, scared, worried. How much more can I do? How can I fix this? What do I do? Kim, can I come stay with you? Like, right, all the things, because they're catastrophizing for
Mm-hmm.
good reason. And like we need to honor that this, we're not talking about mindset being the thing that's going to fix your life. Mindset is a component, and just a component of getting to a space where you can be empowered and where you can still master, have liberation, self-liberation within yourself so that you can be autonomous. Because what happens, particularly when we have crises, right, of which this is, um, we have that collective spin. Everything that happens, right? It was your dog, and then it could have been your kid chewing with his mouth open,
Mm-hmm.
and then it could have been your partner pissing you off saying something, and then it could have been your car, and then it could have been the driver in the next car. Like, all of those things compound. And when it's just us, right? When that's that personal thing that's happening, not passing to that up level,
Mm-hmm.
right? that can feel really full inside of us. It takes up all of us. We don't have availability to resource ourselves using our other tools that we have accessible to us because we are too full with those endorphins, right? We are too full with that emotional overwhelm. Now you add to that not just a household, not just a community, but an entire country, regardless of what side you are on the entire voting thing down there. Everybody is churned up. And now you have collective energy that is bleeding out of an entirely big country, not even a small country, big country, bleeding out. It's coming out all over the world and people are feeling it. And so that stress, that cortisol is building up in all of us, even if we're not there, even if we're not in the middle of it, even if we're not arguing somebody or afraid to show up to the polls to vote, we're feeling it. And so when we're feeling it and it's building and building and building and building and building, how do we get to that place of going, oh, wait, I have a little autonomy here. Oh, wait, I don't have to feel all of this. And by resourcing myself, I'm actually allowing myself to be more present and allowing myself to be a part of whatever I want to be a part of. And oh, by the way, joy in the midst of crisis is okay. It doesn't mean you don't care. So, but what do we do when we're that flooded?
Yeah, because it does feel like you're drowning.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's a great question. Because I think too.
I mean, do you want me to answer it?
Well, you can. There's the emotional piece that you're gonna. I want you to talk into that because like this is your space. So this is your superpower. I think also too is that I love what you said about like when we kind of claim that back for ourselves, that we know that we have this power, this autonomy to be able to show up differently. We're also contributing to that global energy in a different way as well. And so this isn't just about like us as a single person reconnecting and finding joy in the midst of chaos. It's actually what we're doing is like we're taking that drop of water that's flooding the country right now, the world right now, and we're taking it back. And we're saying, I'm not going to I'm not going to contribute to that. Right. And I think that's really important too, because like, that's what I felt when you were talking. It's like, yeah, I'm flooded and we get to talk about how to unflood yourself. We are also stopping the contribution of the flooding, right? We're no longer contributing in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is, I'm going to give an example. Okay. So yesterday I had this call with these amazing humans. And as we stepped onto the call, the first three people, we always do a check-in. The first three people were like, everything feels heavy. It just all feels heavy. And I can't pull myself up. The world is falling apart. We were joking about it being a dumpster fire in 2020. Like, this is no joke. The world is literally falling apart around us. And I can't do any more. I can't do anymore, but I have to keep going. And it's just so heavy. It's a slog. And then it came to me. And I explained and they went into the details of all the different reasons why it was heavy and a slog. And I shared what's happening in the Middle East, what's happening in the United States, what's happening still in Ukraine, what's happening in my own family with dealing with my mom's breast cancer, with dealing with stuff that's happening in my own home. Like, there's all this stuff. And yes, it's very heavy and I care deeply. And there is concern and there is worry and there is confusion and there is doubt. Like, that's all there. And I have a container to hold that. I'm not containing it. I'm not putting it in a box and putting it on a shelf, but I have a container. I have a bowl that I can hold that. And by allowing myself to have this bowl, just a little bit of containment, has created an opportunity for my light to come back. So in this group, part of what I felt my job was with the group, and I shared it with them, was I can hold that heaviness and share my light, make it big enough so that you can resource off of that, so that you can hold on to a little bit of light. Fast forward to 90 minutes later, and there were two other women in this group that were also in the same spot where they were like, yeah, the heaviness of the world, absolutely. I'm holding that and I feel really good. I'm in a really light space. Like I can share my light. I can share my joy. Fast forward to 90 minutes. It was a very different conversation and everybody was in the light. And it was just owning my light, the other women owning their light, and then being willing to share it. Because just like you said, Louise, it's like the floodgates work both ways.
Mm-hmm.
And we have an opportunity wherever we are. If we are not in a place where we can hold the heaviness and be in light, then that's not our job at that moment. If we are just in it and we are flooded, then we have a responsibility to ourselves and to the collective to be aware of where the light is in our world. And it can be something as simple as the celebration, right? Or calling a friend. And yes, venting, sharing, worrying together, but then also laughing or loving or caring and just finding those sparks of light that we can share with each other. It is energetic. It is a little like some people are like, even women on the call were like, how do you borrow someone's light? Like we can get into that totally. But it's that idea of we are in a global collective. And the closer the individuals are physically to us, the more we're going to share that energy. And so if we have that capacity to find even a little light, a little joy, while holding what is so heavy in our lives, then I do feel like we have that responsibility for ourselves and for everyone else. And again, there are ways to make sure that you don't siphon yourself out because that can also be a problem. But
Right.
conceptually,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. So that key ingredient, what I'm hearing from you, there's a couple things that you said that I think are really, I was going to say profound because it feels like it's is very important. Is community, and it's the people that you are surrounding yourself with. I think when we get into times of crunch, often those people who are close to us, they don't have a light to shine. They either are feeling the grief too, right? Deeply. And so it is finding folks who have already figured that out where they can um, hold both sides of it, right? Where you can hold the heavy and shine the light. There are people in the world who know already how to do that. And so having folks in your community, in your collective, folks that are close to you, you already know who they are, because you've seen them do some amazing things, and you're like, how did they do that? Um, and so those are the people that we need to come together and surround ourselves with, so that we can, like in your group, right? We can actually see someone else model that and then be able to do that ourselves. It's not something we can often do alone.
It's really hard to do alone. It is really hard to do alone. And just to underscore that part just a little bit is if you are alone, if as a listener you are alone and you don't feel like you have community or resources, there are communities and resources available. And it's just like I was saying at the beginning, it's looking for those opportunities. And sometimes we have to look a little harder, but they're always there. They really are. I know it doesn't feel like it, but that I think comes from when we're in that place of flood, of refusing what's there, right? It's like
Right.
I'm already underwater, that that rope isn't going to help me because I can't reach it.
Right.
But
Yeah.
what if What if you were able to just pull yourself just a little bit, right? If we're talking about significant mental health disorders, that is when you get help from a trained therapist. If it's talking about feeling like disconnected from people, you don't even have to talk to people, but sometimes just being in their energy can help you feel better. So whether it's something online or something in person, allowing yourself to do that thing that feels really hard in that moment, allow yourself to try something. It starts to churn things in a different way for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think too, the other thing that you said that I find very interesting and I wanted to put a pin in is that we can be we're more than one emotion at a time. Like,
Yes.
right? Like it's
Just go,
not.
just go see Inside Out. You'll know that.
And so let's not forget that. Like let's not forget like that we can feel like the deep wound and find joy. We can feel the profound sadness and find a light that's there. And sometimes it's the joy in the sadness or the light in the grief that is actually right there too. And so, you know, we feel these heavy things because we deeply care about what's happening to ourselves and to others. So let's not forget that. Like we don't want to quash that. We don't want to push that aside. These things that are heavy are heavy because we care, and so let's also remember that too.
Yeah. So, if taking that example that you shared at the beginning, right, when you were talking about leaning into resilience,
Mm.
about as you were feeling when you came out of that credentialing exam, the heaviness was there for sure, right? What else was there for you?
Well, it's interesting because it wasn't. I didn't pick up on it immediately, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
I had to like work through that heaviness, but I couldn't work through it if I wasn't acknowledging it. And so like that was
Mm,
kind of that first part was to say like as logical as I could make everything, it was like it still fucking sucked.
yeah.
Like I studied really hard and it started to impact me. That fail that I saw on that piece of paper when I walked out of that exam felt deeply personal, like I was a failure. And I needed to recognize that. And we could all say, I could already hear the listeners go, no, you're not. It's not what you are. It's like, it's the, and I go, I know. Cause I thought that too, but I didn't deeply feel it.
Right.
And so really just sitting in that emotion for a moment was so very important to me to be able to deeply feel, right, the disappointment, the hurt, the frustration, the anger, all of those emotions, and I felt them. And then I was like, hey, like what's what's the other side of this, right? Like I can have all of those emotions, and guess what, I get to share a story about like what that exam was really like. I
Mm-hmm.
get to share a story about sitting in a proctored exam in my mid 50s, right? And when was the last time I took a freaking exam like that, right? Sit in a gymnasium in, right, college.
Yeah.
um really really tough, and I have that experience now. I have that story now. um and guess what, like I am gonna do better. I'm gonna figure out, I'm gonna talk to folks. I'm gonna find out, right, there's a whole community of folks out there who have not passed this credentialing exam
Mm-hmm.
on the first try, and it's like, hey, guess what, they're there to help support me and they're there to like give me tips and tricks. But just knowing that they're out there, like just immediately was like, hey, I actually belong to a pretty cool group of people who tried something really scary and then had to try it again.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that
And
was like me taking the bar exam, right?
right,
It's terrifying. It's
absolutely.
so what I heard is that acknowledgement, right? Acknowledgement and then acceptance.
Hmm.
Two things that are really hard to do, right? So if we think of things outside of our control, things on the global stage, how do we first we have to acknowledge them. Things are fucked up and we cannot believe that we are where we are, but we are where we are. Okay, we have to acknowledge that. We have to acknowledge that choices were made along the way by different people, even maybe ourselves, and we are where we are. We could say this about this time. We could say this about the systems that we live in. We could say about all the things, right? So first, let's just acknowledge. Don't put our head in the sand. Then we have to accept. We have to accept not only the circumstances, but we have to accept any part that we may have had at play in it.
Absolutely. And we've had a part to play.
Yeah.
Right. So like,
Yep.
let's not just sit there and go, oh, did I have a part to play? Didn't I? Yeah, you did.
Yeah. It is our individual choices that allow us to come back to that place of autonomy and self-liberation. It is our collective choices. And I don't mean by just like glossing over. I mean the gathering of all of our collective choices together that have gotten us where we are. And those of us that were not empowered to act on our choices, who are now learning how to be empowered to live into their choices. That is where the turn is happening on a global stage, right? We lived as most humans lived disempowered lives. Most humans are still living disempowered lives. And we see it on our day-to-day stuff by saying, I failed, and this is what it says about me. Even if it doesn't say anything about me as a human being, this says X, Y, and Z, I can't do this with my career, right? Because somebody judged you. I'm not even gonna put air quotes, they did, they judged you. But then we have this place of the disempowerment that we feel collectively, right? We're disempowered in our own lives. We're disempowered in our countries, in our systems, in our jobs, in our whatevers. And then we have this collective disempowerment. And when we're feeling that, how do we not all feel like we're drowning? And how do we start to step back into whatever the fuck empowerment even is, right? Like we started this podcast because we want to reclaim these words for what it really is. Empowerment doesn't mean that we're walking around feeling confident, joyful, and purposeful. It's like, how do we do that when we all feel like on some level, like we're drowning?
Well, we've said that, right? Like it's coming back to like you as the individual, right? What do you have control over? Where is it that you need to explore? What are those glasses, right? Those perspective that you want to be taking in this moment, and taking action to align those things. I think is like that's really what we're talking about. Like empowerment is nothing without action. I'm going to say that, right? Like that's really what we're talking about. And we're talking about too is like fully knowing, right, yourself in order to know what that alignment is. Because we don't want to be contributing to like this outside alignment, right? That's not
Right.
empowerment either,
Well,
right?
that's the collective disempowerment, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think we can get confused sometimes about like what that really is. And this is what we're talking about, where we're fully in choice, where we have the most power and control is this inside place, right?
Yeah. And it's, I mean, you started talking, I'm like, it's a theory of change because it starts with the individual, right? And then we move out from there until we get out to the collective. And that's 100% what it is. How do we change the world? We change the world by changing ourselves. How do we change? Like, again, we're recording this before we know anything about anything. And even when this drops on November 5th, we're not going to know anything about anything. Let's just own this. And we don't know the outcomes on other global stages either. We just don't. We don't know those outcomes. And as you were talking about at the beginning of like, it's not about the outcome. In many ways, we tie ourselves to, we're going to be, hell in a handbasket if this happens again. We're going to be so fucked if this happens again. Yeah, there's going to be the lot that goes really, really wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And humanity is, and I'm going to use the word, humanity is resilient. And I mean that in the way that I believe the definition is written as, which does mean a period of healing and growth. We don't just push through. That's perseverance.
Yeah, that is not resilient at all. We
It,
very much bastardized that word for sure.
right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. The perseverance means keep going.
Mm-hmm.
Resilience means we take the time to do what needs to be done so that we can eventually create forward, quote unquote, forward momentum, whatever that looks like. So we can have a place of returning to, in this case, ourselves. And so even if hell goes, like we go to hell in a handbasket here, what do we do so that we are not going to hell in a handbasket? Just the world around us is. But we as individuals don't have to. We as individuals can be resilient so that we can support each other, so we can spread our light. What are some of the things that we can do?
I'm scratching my head because I'm itchy, but there's so many things. You didn't see that on the podcast, but I am. There's so many things and so many, I think, tools that can be really useful. When we can be taking a moment to figure out how to be in the moment, I think is probably the tool that I have practiced. It's probably not something that you right like this is kind of the idea too of like how to practice some of these things before you really need them. But even if you really need them, there are ways to find yourself um, and give yourself some grace to be able to find some presence, right? Being present in the moment, being aware of immediately what's around you, is a big part of starting to regain that control. It's that what you talked about, right? Like it's like just getting your head up above the water so you can take a breath.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's those self-care like present practices. And so you can call them meditation, you can call it meditation. And this is the cool thing about this is that it's all individual. And
Mm-hmm.
so it could be meditation, it could be ritual, right? It can be reading, it can like whatever that is that works for you, where you're able to like fully be in your body in that moment, right? And there's lots of tools and guidance. And Kim, you even have some great meditations that you share with
Mm-hmm.
folks around how to be fully present. But that's the thing that sticks out for me is like finding your tool, finding your jam around like what brings you to presence and 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 practice,
Yeah, that's
right?
practicing is so important because not just for those crisis moments, as you were saying. Like
Mm-hmm.
doing this creates resilience. It's just like if we eat cookies all day every day, what's going to happen in the long run? We're going to have at the very least we're going to have a tummy ache. If not, we're going to like not have other nutrients we need, and there's going to be results to that.
We might end up hating cookies, which would
We,
be a shame as well.
right? Exactly. It's like, ugh, I don't want to ever see another cookie in my life. Um, we can also, if what we've been doing is eating cookies all day, every day, or streaming social media all day, every day, not saying anything in particular, um, that's what we're consuming. If we take 5 minutes to not consume those cookies, or 5 minutes not to consume that social media or that news feed, that's 5 minutes that your system actually can regulate. Now imagine if you did 5 minutes 3 times a day. Now you've given yourself 15 minutes of regulation. You've given yourself 15 minutes of the day where your body isn't being inundated by the same thing over and over and over again that is not nourishing to it. And so how do we know what are those things that we need to step back from? Well, that's a little bit of trial and error, but we also all know how we feel. We really do know that when we've been scrolling, doom scrolling, we're looking for something, but we're not getting it. What we're getting is something that's feeding that beast inside of us that is leaving us more and more dissociated and more dysregulated. So my feed, honestly, is filled with three things. It is filled with dogs, it is filled with drag queens, and it is filled with stage managers. And the reason my feed is filled that way is because I've taught it to be filled that way. I do not spend time in the doom scroll. And I don't spend time in the doom scroll because I know how I feel when I do. I get immediately flooded. And not only does that not allow me to be of service to those that I'm providing service to in the world, it's harming me. It's physically harming me. It's making me sick. It's emotionally making me sick. It's physically making me sick. And the best way that I know, right, to give ourselves that opportunity is to actually listen to our body. And we do that through pause. The minute we pause and we go, okay, I don't really want to pay attention to my body because I know I'm already anxious. I'm already feeling depressed. I'm feeling lethargic. Ugh, my ass is too big. Whatever it is, it's going to pop into your head. It's okay. Get through that. That's an emotion. That thought is actually an emotion. And that emotion will only last between 30 and 90 seconds. If you can get through that 30 to 90 seconds and get to the other side, then you can say, okay, well, I notice I have a little bit of a knot in kind of my upper stomach. All right, I'm just going to send it some breath. I don't even need to know what it's about. I'm just going to send it some breath. Okay. Maybe putting my hand on it because the breath I wasn't able to get a nice deep breath. Just rubbing my hand on it, giving it just a little bit of love. It's gone. And now I can go back to whatever I was doing. That doesn't take studying, by the way. You don't have to be practiced in somatics. You don't have to understand anything about your body's language other than your body's language. But that is unique to you. I can't tell you your body's language.
Right.
So yeah, I really hope that what people are hearing is that we have this opportunity to return to self all the time. And it is that return to self, literally returning to our bodies, that starts to bring us a little bit of autonomy, that starts to bring us a little bit more ease, that brings us a little bit more peace in the midst of that flooding and that really scary place that so many people are operating in right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it's that, even as you're talking, right? Like your hands are on your body, like you're almost like starting to give yourself a hug, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you're bringing something to yourself, which is the opposite of this pushing that we think we have to do. This outwards, right? Push through, push away, push others, push buttons, whatever. Right. And that's really what we're talking about, right? Is that like, how do you bring towards yourself? How do you right, use the knowledge that you have of your body to be able to grab control and start showing up in a way that feels really good to you. Yeah.
The way you were just touching your sweater just reminded me of one more thing that I just want to kind of share with people before we say goodbye for the day is if things feel too big, which very often when we're feeling flooded, when we're feeling overwhelmed and distraught by these situations and we just can't get our thoughts under control, very often going and finding a blanket and wrapping it around us like a hug, like you were just saying, like you were kind of doing with your sweater, that can very often settle the frenetic energy that we're feeling that is overflowing and bubbling up throughout our bodies. So just another little thing that just watching you touch your sweater reminded me of. I'm like, oh yeah, that's another good one. So if you're feeling out
Yeah.
of control, get yourself a blankie.
A blanny and a hug. That's it. Right. Yeah.
I love that.
Um, thanks for this conversation, Kim.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for your vulnerability because I really feel like that talking into your recent experience, though it didn't affect anybody globally, right? That was very personal. I think it's very relatable. And so I just really want to thank you for that.
Yeah, because we're talking about when it feels heavy, and it doesn't have to be big to feel heavy. And and I don't want folks to feel like we're only talking about really big things. Like we're talking about things that feel really big. It doesn't mean they're big in the world.
Yeah, I know. Except for I do, I was born and raised in the United States, so everything's big.
I know. I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to say anything. Is it something about Texas and belt buckles? I don't know.
Oh. Friends, I hope that you can find someone to laugh with today, whatever day you're listening to this. Grab your blankie, wrap yourself in it, and know that we are always here for you. We've got your back. And thank you for listening in.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Take care. Bye for now. And that's all for this week's episode of the Empowered and Embodied Show. We hope today's episode has sparked something within you. Remember, we're all on this journey together. If something did resonate with you today, why not share it with a friend who might need to hear it too? You can find us everywhere you listen to podcasts. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you're feeling generous, leave a review. Your feedback not only helps others find the show, but also helps us understand what's most valuable to you. Until next time, be kind to yourself, stay curious, and remember, we're walking right alongside you. Thanks for being part of our community.